All right, welcome to another Purpose and Power Talk conversations on transformation. I'm here with Rich Villazon, who's now a coach who was once operating as a Marine in the Marine Corps. I had the pleasure of connecting with Rich at my mentor's event a few months back, and we finally got connected and had some conversations, and I was blown away by his personal story of transformation, what he's been through, what he's overcome, and what he's up to in the world. And Rich is also someone that I see who is extremely intelligent, brings together maps and models of consciousness and life and human behavior and psychology. He shares them on Instagram, which I'm going to encourage you to follow, and the link will be in the description. But you really want to check out what he's putting together. He curates some of the most amazing and fascinating bits of information and, like I said, maps and models to understand life, consciousness, and other facets of our experience here as human beings. So, Rich, thank you for being here today. I'm glad to have you on the Purpose and Power Talk show. How's it going, man?
Good, man. Thank you. Thank you so much for the introduction. And, just really appreciate you and what you're doing. So, yeah, thank you so much, man.
Yeah, thanks, brother. Truly appreciate you as well, man. It's like instant connection with you.
Yeah.
So I'd love to introduce a little bit about, why don't you tell us a little about your background, just like how you began in life, getting into the Marine Corps, coming out of that. And if you want to go into some of that story, I really would love people to hear, what you've dealt with, what you've overcome.
Yeah, definitely. At about age 19, I didn't really have any sort of life purpose. They don't really, you don't really have that sort of opportunity, or they don't really teach that in school. Like, what is it that you're going to do? So, struggling with school and stuff like that, I decided to join the Marine Corps, and I deployed to, Iraq, Afghanistan, as an infantryman, came back. And that's when I really had like sort of a deep struggle within my own life. Didn't know where I was going, what direction, a lot of pain and suffering in my own life, self-perpetuated pain and suffering. And what really happened was sort of, when suffering gets too big, I think that at some point you have to make a decision. And for me, I sort of pigeonholed myself, at least within my mentality, that I have to make a change. And just having the courage, because it takes courage to pursue that which is difficult. And that's like a huge, to hold on to that courage, knowing that on the other side of that challenge there's going to be light, So I think just having that courage to start pursuing answers of what's going on and why are you suffering? And trying to get to the truth, trying to pursue the truth of what's happening in your reality. And for me, that's what really, really happened. And then, I had a pretty profound, once I started, pursuing answers and getting into personal development and this sort of thing, I had a pretty profound spiritual experience. And then from there, I've been on a sort of a run trying to, evolve myself and evolve other human beings, help people out, and, become the best that we can be, and sort of a holistic approach, all aspects of human development. I really look at the multi-dimensional picture, the big picture, the going wide, broad, and deep. Below the surface is really what I appreciate. And, sometimes it can be scary, but I've learned that in the end, again, you're just going to keep getting stronger, I hope that makes sense. I don't know if I gave you a good synopsis, but
you did. That was a very good general overview. We'll dig a little bit deeper because I got some questions, a couple of things I want to highlight. One, you mentioned, that you were deployed and then you came back and there was kind of like a dark period that you went through, like some suffering. And then you said you had a spiritual experience. So I want to kind of dive into a little bit of those pieces. Number one, when you were deployed, would you say that while you were deployed in Afghanistan and elsewhere, that your experiences there affected you maybe psychologically, emotionally? Or would you say you were already kind of struggling, or maybe a combination of the two? What do you say about it?
Yeah, I think I think both of those, what you said, which is, before I had, because as human beings, you can't get away from not having trauma in your life on some form.
Right.
On any level, you can't go unscathed through life without having trauma. So
Exactly.
there's that, and then also, during the Marine Corps, of course, there's, just put it this way: the Marine Corps, in and of itself, its whole job is to sort of brainwash you. We're always being. Let me also say that we're always being brainwashed by our environment and our society and everything, no matter what. It just depends on what information you take in and which of it is closer to the truth.
Yes.
But anyway, going back to the Marine Corps, and whether or not of course it had a psychological effect. Of course it had an emotional effect upon me in my life. Some good, some not so good. So yeah, I mean, a lot of it was prior to, I think I joined the Marine Corps in a way to sort of go on that according to my level of development on my sort of hero's journey. And then, I got out and sort of the problems started to rise to the surface, and show up in my reality. And at some point you have to face, what's going on in your life and not be a victim, because I think for me, it was like, well, things are showing up again and again and again. Well, and somehow you're pointing the finger out that way. But it's happening to you again and again. Therefore, when are you going to take responsibility?
So you encountered some suffering on the way out that was more prominent. What exactly were you experiencing as the suffering? What exactly was the trouble? And was it external, internal, both?
Yeah, a lot of it derived from my thoughts. I have to be careful with like labels, because labels can be your prison, but like, OCD is like a good category, like, obsessive compulsive disorder. And so that's something I struggle with, and just having, thoughts that arise and then being attached to the thoughts, or resisting thoughts. And of course, when you resist, it persists. And so essentially, just going through a self-perpetuated suffering loop within my own mind. And because of that, my reality showed up in such a way that it was proven by my own negative thoughts. And until like the spiritual experience that I had, that's when I really sort of had a direct realization, because it's one thing about like talking about things, but actually groping something and like having a paradigm shift, or like, some people call it an enlightenment experience. That's different, because I think it shifts the way you sort of see the world.
Yeah. So like you have a new view of things.
Yeah.
What was, so it's funny. Your description of OCD is like, wow, I think a lot of people call that stress and worry, but it's like everybody goes through that to some degree. But it can get intense, and I've been through it myself. So I really understand like having those obsessive thoughts and like unable to just shake them and like, just like compelled by them. It's like, man, like, I've worked with a lot of people myself who struggle with that. And, at the bottom of it, I always find that there's trauma, and there's a compensation for a trauma that they just haven't worked out. They haven't integrated the trauma. And so they're still trying to survive a trauma. And as a result of the survival of the trauma, whatever programming they formed in the heat of the moment, like that just is running incessantly, and it's impossible to break until like there's a spiritual awakening. Or another way to say it is, I would say their eyes have, seen fully like the function, the program, like what's actually happening in the background. So what kind of thoughts were you having, like more specifically, so people could relate and identify with you? Cause I'm sure your story is not just yours,
Yeah. Yeah. Just in general, and to be honest, like I haven't completely transcended, my thoughts and stuff like that, but something as simple as like,
I was enlightened 20 years ago and I haven't either.
yeah,
There's still thoughts.
yeah. No, I know. I'm just, I like to sort of be authentic and, be real.
Yeah.
Like,
Appreciate that.
yeah, man. The, like, so there was like actually just a couple weeks ago, really, like there was this thought of, insanity, right? Like becoming insane, right?
Mm.
And it perpetuated itself, and my thoughts took control, and it has a tendency to keep kicking back up, reintroducing itself, the thoughts. But it's not necessarily that. It could be really anything. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what happens if, for instance, my son, a thought arises such as my son's walking outside and he gets hit by a car, and like, so in my mind, it's actually happening. It's actually real. Uh, my alarm body response is showing up, and my whole body feels as if it's reality.
Mm.
And so, I mean, I don't want to be too specific as to what the thoughts are, but, people with OCD or that, tend to that sort of thing, there's a tendency to uh, ruminate on a thought and actually believe it. And because of that, you become obsessive of it, and it continues to show up within your mind, and yeah,
I love how you also mentioned that it actually is experienced in the body. And I
yeah,
think, thoughts really do affect the biochemical functions,
right,
and the physiological functions of body.
yeah, and it's all feedback loops with each other. So obviously you feel the emotion and your body, and then so the body reinforces the thought, and it's a cyclic effect until you take the witness stance, which is the observer, which is pure consciousness.
Mm.
And that's really the key, I think. But also to work on what you talked about earlier, which is trauma, and to see what's actually going on a deeper level, and what's actually causing that obsession, and what's causing that distraction, or what's causing that neuroses that each and every pretty much human being has.
Mm.
And that's where the real work, I think, happens, right? So
Totally, man. And, I'm glad you brought all this up, because I found that, even recently for me in the last year, I went through a tremendous amount of that. There was some definitely unpacked trauma showing up and in my life and my relationship. And fortunately, I'm trained well enough, and I've worked with so many people, and I have explored territory, that I was able to be with myself through it. It didn't lessen the pain and suffering and the fear and all the other stuff, but having that understanding, it did give me some sense of security through it that I wouldn't have had otherwise. And I was able to just like really seek out the right kind of support and help, and even train people around me how to help me deal with what was surfacing, because I'm on a mission to really like clear my soul. And the more I know that if I'm going to support others in doing that, I need to lead the way personally. And so I've been doing it deeply. And when this new stuff showed up, I was like, man, I'm ready. I got to take this on. And I just got real, raw, vulnerable, and just unpacked a whole nother layer of stuff. So, and there was a lot of obsessive thinking and fear, and just unable to shake it. And it doesn't make me less of a coach. It makes me more of a coach. It's helped me help the people around me even more effectively, because I've gone to another layer of suffering and breakthrough into peace, and I've found ways to overcome that. In fact, it drove me more into my spiritual core, which is what I'm hearing happened for you at a point in time. So I want to hear about that part. Like, you went through that suffering stage, and then there was a moment of spiritual awakening. And it sounds like, just like me, you've been driven right closer to that spiritual core as a result of these things. So it's almost like they work for you if you really just, if you surrender to the process of where it's guiding you. It's scary, it's terrifying, it seems compelling, and it's out of control. And yet, like, you just kind of, you have almost no choice but to find something different, something greater inside of yourself. So what was that experience like for you?
Yeah. It's everything what you're saying. Real quick, just to sort of piggyback on what you're saying in regards to,
Sure.
Embodiment, and being sort of, as Mahatma Gandhi said, being that change you want to see, right?
Mm.
You can't, like, the coach or the therapist or whoever it is that's supporting you can only go as far as, the person has gone themselves, at some point your client or, coachee or whoever it is that you're, trying to help and support, may bring some deep stuff. And, if you haven't done that yourself, well, it can be also challenging for yourself. So I think you're spot on when you say like embodiment and doing the work yourself, and not just, merely talking about it, but, doing the difficult work that in the end, is going to allow you to become just such an empowered human being,
Absolutely, man.
And then, so going back to the spiritual part, I was just driving in my car, and then, I was on the start of this journey of like trying to look for answers. Why is it that my life is not the way I want it to be? Why is it that I'm suffering? I would, just to preface a little bit, I would go after work and just start like crying in my truck, and just total misery. And I was hiding it from everybody. My wife called me and I'm sitting there crying. I'm like, yeah, how's everything? Trying to fake the funk, put an outside shell, this facade of I'm so happy and look at me. And, and it was all bullcrap, because deep down inside I was suffering quite a bit. And yeah, until I, had the courage, started looking for answers, I was in my truck listening to different audio programs and different, things to sort of, get wisdom as to what's going on. Which is another point, is that whatever problem you have, there's answers out there that someone has dealt with it and has been on that journey, and you can go over that hump. And that's something else I learned. But going back to, I was in my car and listening to a podcast, pursuing, wisdom. And, he said something simple. He said, you are not your thoughts, you are not your thoughts. And when I heard that, it was I don't know, like I've never taken MDMA or ecstasy or anything like that. But I'd imagine that that's exactly sort of how it feels. And I just had a sort of just a rush of energy within my body. And I remember becoming like an observer of everything that was going in my reality, and thoughts were coming in my mind, like at 1,000,000 miles per hour, like this thought, that. But I was just laughing at the thoughts, and I was just like pure awareness of everything. And thoughts were coming in, and I just remember just laughing hysterically for no reason at my own self-perpetuated delusion and illusion of my reality. And it was weird because, and there's a few instances where I remember things about it. And I remember talking to, a guy at work, and he was right in front of me, and I had a deep connection with him, and there was like absolute zero judgment. I mean, someone across from me could have said they're a murderer. They've done all sorts of, terrible stuff. And I probably, I would have treated them just like any other human being. There was no judgment. There was a connection, between everybody I was engaged with. And I also remember doing my dishes, something I hate doing. I can't stand doing dishes, right? And I was completely at peace with doing the dishes. Just, it was an amazing experience. And I remember my son looking at me, and he even knew that like something was weird that was going on. And he tried to like provoke me, through his behavior. He was trying to like get me to get upset or something. And I just like kind of stared at him and looked at him and detached from that reality. And I just had another thing that came up was no fear. Like, not to say no fear absolutely, but very little fear. It was incredible. It was incredible. And it lasted a few days. And before I ignorantly, I thought that it was going to last forever. And I was talking to my wife. I'm like, I got an insight, and and I'm seeing the world differently. And this is, I've changed, and she's like, awesome, cool. I'm so happy for you, and, and then sure enough, as soon as it came, it just kind of, that level of consciousness, that state of awareness just kind of merged away. And I fell back into, the sort of, how do I say it? The falsehood, the imaginations, the
like being your thoughts again,
yeah,
instead of being above the thought.
Right. That's excellent way to put it. Yeah.
I got it.
Yeah. Being the awareness versus forgetting that, essentially forgetting who you are,
Yeah.
on a deep level. Right.
Yeah. Like getting wrapped up in that thought cycle as if that's the identifying with that and the bodily sensations versus that like spatial, like observatory. I'm not at the effect of anything. I can witness it. And I want to point out a couple of things you said that were, highlight them really. I love how like you were witnessing your thoughts. You weren't being the thoughts. You weren't like identified with them. And you kind of like had a 40,000 foot view of what was going on above it. And then you noticed like that there was someone in your space that you could actually witness with the same purity of observation, like just taking in whatever was there, and nothing in your mind was judging it or interpreting it. It was just like you were just being with this person as he is. And I love that, because when I do transformational work in groups and I bring people together, or in my coaching one-to-one even, but the idea with groups especially is, how do I configure people in such a way that they get that experience of one another? And I've been on that mission because I know that there's many ways to facilitate that, because like me too, I had my enlightenment moment 20 years ago, and I was like, oh my God, we're all God, you know what I mean? And people thought I was crazy for saying that, especially some of the religious people, and like, but I was like, no, man, I'm telling you, like, we're all that, like that spatial, like pure source of life. And I just was witness to it within me as me. And I saw that everybody was connected to that. And I was like glowing for a while. And then next thing you know, like, I had just come out of being a drug dealing criminal. I'm turning my life around. I was meditating, seeking answers, and I was seeking truth, and I got truth, or at least a moment of it. And then next thing you know, I'm like, still got to deal with my shit, like my life, I got to make money. I got to, whatever. And everything just kind of felt like I was still a human. And I was like, man, how could I have that crazy big moment? Then I just became passionate for pursuing that, like, always, like, how do I get to it? How do I take others to it? And I think that's the journey that I've been on. And like, even now, 20 years later, having been in this work for so long, so intensely, I'm still dealing with things myself, new levels of thought and trauma to clear and learn lessons about. But I bring that right into my coaching work, which, I also see you are able to do, is because like, hey man, like the other thing I want to say is like, as men, like you brought up a point, you're in your car, your wife calls and she's like, you're crying, you're like suffering, and you're like putting on the facade, like, yeah, I'm good, honey. And especially men. And not that there's women that don't do that. I know plenty do, but there's a real thing about men who just like, we can't be broken. Like we have to uphold the strength. And that's what I went through this last year, was like, I've been that guy. Like I was upholding it. I wasn't being vulnerable. I couldn't feel all that. I was like, I was preventing all that from happening. And I just finally let it all go. And I crumbled, man. I really did. And it didn't look good. It wasn't pretty. I cried a lot, suffered a lot, got help, needed help. But now I've got tons of men and people in my life that wouldn't have been available to me if I didn't fall down like that. Like I have this mentorship and coaching and support that like a new level of people in my life that drove me, like it drove me to get other people to support me through the process I was going through. And I look back and I'm like, man, thank God that it happened. It was terrifying, but I was shielding myself from having people lead me. I had some like a negative thought about leaders who I felt like let me down. So like I wouldn't let anyone lead me at all. So I was limiting my capacity to grow.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, man. I think you're sort of, like I think I can only speak really for, Westernized sort of culture, but because, I've been to other countries, but I haven't been embedded within them. But, there's definitely sort of I think, distorted version of what a real man is and looks like, and it's not somebody. It's not a man who puts a shield of what stems from sort of insecurity and trauma, and this sort of outer barrier of these quasi, sort of, alpha male types that you see, and so yeah, being a real man is actually balancing the the yin and the yang, the sort of the masculine and the feminine. And because it takes a lot of masculine energy to be feminine,
Yes.
like
To
because
be vulnerable.
yeah, to be vulnerable, to be soft, right?
Right.
So that in of itself takes masculine energy. It's all
Wow.
intertwined and interconnected.
I love
And
that.
so, and I, all you're going to do essentially, as a man, if you're putting on that sort of, you have that, you're holding up that shield. Well, damn, that shield, when you hold it up for so long, you get tired, man. And you're going to get worn out. And, in the end, maybe that's a good thing, because that'll lead you to a different path, right? Each person's on their own path, but you don't have to do it that way. You can sort of self-traject yourself towards growth in the right way, without having to sort of, deal with that burden, and deal with that pain and that suffering, so yeah.
I want to highlight what you said, because I talk a lot around the masculine and feminine principle within a human being, and I have a lot of different distinctions around that. But what you said, I've never articulated, and so I want to just restate it. You said it takes a lot of masculine energy to be with that, to be the feminine. And, the feminine is the receptive. It is the allowing in. It is that's why I'm taking in support now from other people in ways I haven't before. Not that I wasn't supportive, but it's way more because I have embraced more of that. I've been the strength of vulnerability. It sounds like a paradox, but the strength of vulnerability, because it takes a hell of a lot of courage to open up, especially as a man, like to really say, man, I'm not doing so good, man. Like I'm feeling scared. I'm feeling weak inside. Like my thoughts are running in a certain direction. I don't know how to handle my relationship right now. I'm scared about my kids. Like, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to provide as a father or as a husband or as a man to my woman or my partner or whatever it is. Like, to be able to communicate all that stuff and have somebody in the listening that you trust, that, like, you know what I mean? Like, it takes a lot of courage to come out and say those things. And, I was resisting the heck out of that, and I get that you were too. And now you've like reached a level where it's like, no, man, like it's good and it's safe. And I really feel like you embody like a healthy male, like you demonstrate real masculinity, which is like, you're not afraid to be, open and vulnerable, and you're humble. Like you come off to me as a humble guy, but I also know how rich in insight and wisdom you are. And I know you care about people. And like, just when you first approached me, like we talked, like I could just feel like how generous you were with me. And you've been that way every time we talk. Like, you really are not afraid to express your love, care, and appreciation for another. And that's not always easy if we're a hard male shielding ourselves. Like, we don't need nobody, so we don't really express our appreciation. Like, that's a more of a feminine quality. It takes a lot of courage to do that. And that's vulnerability. And like, you demonstrated that to me from the very get-go, and I just loved you from day one. Like, I was like, this guy and I have to connect, because good vibes. So really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, thank you, brother. And I really appreciate you as well, man. And when that first time I saw you, what I noticed was your sense of presence and your groundedness and your level of awareness. You had your eyes wide open and you were in the moment. And and so it's hard to, especially in our culture, going back to sort of our society and stuff like that, we got a lot of work to do as a society, but it's hard to sort of hold that conversation and be, with it and connecting, in such a way. And that's what I noticed about you, man. So I appreciate you, man. And you're also helping me, and we're helping each other. And, I think that's powerful, man. Supporting each other. So
yes, I love that, man. I love the militaristic background you have, because I never studied I never did any military training per se, but my stepdad was in the military. I studied martial arts and other disciplines, and I've taken them to sometimes the extreme level of training and discipline. Suffering is something that physical suffering, like in the body, I have a high tolerance to pain, and that's been a good thing, but it also has its downsides. Because that prevented me from sharing sometimes the hurts that I was feeling, because I just kind of could shrug stuff off. And so I noticed I had to deal with that. I had to learn to like, I had a tough outside just from all the years of just being a tough kid, you know, and growing up tough and violent and, you know, training myself to literally punching concrete walls, you know what I mean? Like little by little, increasing the intensity, you know, doing Kung Fu training, smashing arms together over and over and over until like, you know, if people were like fool around with me, try to tickle me, I would block a little bit and they'd be like, ow, you know, like I hurt their arm so badly and I barely tried to do it. I was just automatic, but like, it then had this like hardness to me, you know, but then my heart was like, it wasn't as open and it wasn't as soft. And like, and I was just I was denying the pain inside as I could deny the pain outside. And eventually I had to work my way back in.
Yeah, definitely, man. And you know, you're making a good point. And I think it's key to because you know, being a man, a fully developed man, it you know, to be aware of the violent aspects of you or the strong aspects of you or the sort of the warrior, you know, you can say archetype within each man that you can't really get out of. You can't, you know, that structure of consciousness within society is there. So if you don't incorporate it, it forms, you know, a pathology and you know, it shows up in dysfunctional ways. So I think it's all about being a holistic man, being integrated, and owning the warrior, but also you know, having the capability to like kick ass when need be, because you never know when that may show up in your reality. But at the same time, know when to channel it down and be open, be loving, be compassionate, and carry your brother, you know, and give him a hand, or, you know, love your woman properly, right? And all these other aspects of what it is to be a man, you know. So it's not a one or the other, it's more so integration and including, you know, a healthy version of it.
I'm glad you brought that up. You know, I just started jumping into a book, The Warrior, the King, the Magician, and the Lover, or whatever, however it's titled, but on Carl Jung's basic archetype distinctions. And so, you know, there's a men's group called the Sacred Sons out in California. And are you familiar with them?
I heard about it. Yeah, I've seen a little bit about it.
Follow them on Instagram, and I subscribe for the monthly call. In fact, the guy who coached me recently, he's a new facilitator. He was on the land that they actually do their convergence event, and those guys are great, man. Probably some of the best guys I've met ever. Those monthly calls, I think it was like $33 a month. You get a monthly call, about 12, 15 guys coming together and sharing like whatever's there. And like, I mean, talk about presence. Everything can be seen, witnessed, shared. These group of men really embody like the holistic dimension of masculinity and the feminine principle. And I've never seen such a group of people. So I'm aiming to get out at the event on I think it's February or March, end of February, March. And yeah, I'm really excited to do that work. And I'd like to talk to you more about that. But the idea there is that men, you know, they use the 4 archetypes and as part of the conversation. And, you know, the warrior you were mentioning, like, I even see like my woman, she's powerful, like she's tough, like when she needs to be, and she can be so feminine and so like, I mean, I love like, it's like truly like the contrast, you know, and like sometimes, you know, her or I could lean into one more than the other. Like I'm more of a warrior and less of a lover. She's more of a warrior or king and less of a lover, like, because women embody that too. It's not just for men. Right. I've noticed, but I learned so much from her. And like, there's a lot of qualities that she embodies and I'm like, oh man, like she kind of walks with this queenly, like, she don't run for nothing. I walk fast everywhere. And she just like, but if I'm walking fast or slow, like she just keeps, she has this pace, like she doesn't wait for nothing. I'm like, I love that. I'm like, wow, you know? And then of course I have qualities that she sees and wants to embody more too. So it's, you know, like the more very spiritually oriented and like my relationship with the divine, like I gotta constantly connect with that. And, you know, we exchange together and I think it's powerful. And that can't happen unless we get these different facets of, or archetypes of consciousness and how to move from one to another at the appropriate time, right? There's an appropriate time to be the warrior. Someone breaks in your house. Honey, go quick, somebody's go to the front door. No, like it's time for you to get your ass up and like take care of business, you know what I'm saying, as a man. And if you can't do that, there's a diminishing quality to oneself, you know, and like we can all develop those qualities. Not that there's anything to be ashamed of around it or not, like we're all in need of growing and expanding our consciousness and capacity to operate and function as human beings.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, everything you're saying, you know, I'm aligning with as well. And Yeah, I mean, and sometimes you may not have to act out that warrior archetype or any, you know, the lover but simply having awareness that that is within you as well, that capacity, uh, and to own it fully, and you know, all aspects and spectrums of the human experience, um, that is key without
Mm.
cutting things off. You know, be open, and yeah, you know, bring consciousness to it
Mm.
is just, you know, a good message. But yeah,
Definitely, brother.
yeah,
You know, before we wrap any of this up, I want to ask a few more questions and have you share a few things. Maybe what
sure.
are some of the top mental models or maps that you like to use that might be top of mind right now?
Yeah, I mean, without a doubt, the first one that comes to mind is the 80-20 principle.
Mm.
You know, basically, you know, 20% of your results come from 80% of your actions, or you know, 20% of uh, your nutrients, or 80% of your nutrients come from only 20% of the food you eat.
Mm.
So basically, and you can keep drilling it down to the point where like, you're getting the highest return on investment, highest return on time, uh, and breaking things down to such a way that, um, that you're maximizing whatever it is that you're doing. So like, for a perfect example would be like, if I'm doing, if I'm trying to build my, you know, I'm trying to work out and sculpt my body,
Mm.
and I want to build my chest. Well, it turns out that 80% of my results of getting stronger in my chest area just so happens to be from bench. So the 20% of the out of the 100% of exercises that I do, 20% of it, which is bench, gives me 80% of the results.
Mm.
And so you can apply the 80-20 principle. It came from Pareto, who was an Italian economist, you know, back in, I think, like the 1900s. And you can sort of map that on whatever reality or whatever that you're doing. Um, you know, Evan Pagan, he's one of our mentors. You know him personally. I don't. And you know, he also taught me about basically, uh, you know, getting a green smoothie, right? So because 80% of those nutrients you're getting from only 20% of your intake, which is the smoothie. So
Yes.
all you're getting it all packed into that tight package. And same thing with learning, same thing with relationships. What 20% of the relationships that I have give me 80% of the positive feedback.
Mm.
And so you can apply it to literally everything. You know, what are the clothes that I wear majority of the time? Get rid of the stuff that I don't, right? Simplify it.
This is good. Yeah. So you're like looking for what is the 20% that's producing the majority of the result? And that's a question to ask oneself. And like about the smoothie, like, yeah, I have a smoothie every day too. Like,
Yeah.
and that I know dang well that that's where the majority of my nutrition is coming from. I got apples and pineapple, and I'll put carrots and celery, and even some zucchini or squash, or vegetables in there, like raw. Like I'll just go raw for a little while. And like, I've had Evan's green smoothies by over there doing video with him. By the way, those things are, you know, not the best tasting, but they're definitely solid. You know what I mean? Because they are compressed and compact. I love that stuff. But you know, really, like in my life too, it's like when you're training, like there's certain things that actually produce most of the results. Like, and so I'm constantly trying to distill down, like you're saying, like the clothes, like which clothes am I actually wearing versus not. I get rid of all that. Just did that when I moved here to Georgia. Literally, it was like, okay, this stuff's not wearing. Let's get rid of most of it and keep what I keep. And then you add new stuff in, and then you kind of do the 80-20 cut again. And you're constantly looking like, what is that 20% that's producing most of the results in my sales, in my life, in my
Mm.
relationship,
Yeah.
and stay with that thing. I find that even for me, what's producing the most results in my life is actually not doing, but it's actually imagining and feeling is creating the biggest difference in my life. And it seems so oversimplified. And we've heard this for years from movies like The Secret that popularize it. But really, I'm just like, I'll just sit and I'll meditate and I'm feeling and thinking like how I want things to be. And I'm just imagining and feeling as if it's already so. And like, boom, things start to show up just like I thought and felt it. And it's like, I'm not struggling. I'm actually learning how to let go of that struggle. And I'm finding that that produces more results for me than a lot of the other things. The more I did, actually, the less I got, the more entangled I got in stuff, and the farther away sometimes I got from my goals. But by
Wow.
doing less, and thinking and feeling more, I noticed that I spontaneously do or have what I need in my life. It's really cool.
Yeah, that's powerful. The sort of the art of letting go, detachment, right? And I'll say one more mental model that I think is important is, realizing your own biases. Because we each sort of see the world from our own individual perspective. So having the willingness and the capability to see other person's point of view, and always, I suppose you don't want to become like neurotic about it, but as much as you can, try to see the lens from which the person sees the world, and and try and find out the partial truths that they may or may not have, and combine that with your own. And I think that's really powerful. Having the willingness to look at your own biases. What is it that I'm biased about? Because you're always going to be biased for your own survival, your own, egoic sort of needs, wants, aspirations, and be willing to take the other lens, see how they see the world, that worldview. Because when you do that, I think you have a bigger picture of reality, and in turn, you can make better decisions and choices because you're not cutting things off.
I can give you a very specific example of that. And in fact, I got support from Evan's wife, Annie. She was giving me some coaching in my relationship. And, I said one thing. I was like, hey, sometimes Elena, if she's upset or whatever, she'll go to bed, she'll just turn her shoulder, and that's it. No good night. No, she'll just go to bed like that. And I'm like, man, that's not a win. We're both losing. I'm like, I want a win-win scenario. At least hey, you can go to bed. We don't have to talk or anything, but just can we just hug each other, go to bed? And Annie was like, well, that's not a win-win for her. It's a win for you. But in her world, just as you have that pain of oh man, you don't want to go to bed without giving her that hug and a kiss, whatever. For her to open up in that moment with whatever she's feeling, whatever she's dealing with, is it's a monumental effort. And I was like, man, and that's where the biasy thing just came in. I was just my bias was this is the way it ought to be, but I wasn't in her world around her discomfort. And that the more I was reaching for her, the more pain it actually was for her. Complete flip side opposite. So I acknowledged that to her and said, hey, I just got this. And just want to let you know, I'm sorry. I didn't understand. I was just in my own view, really believed it was so. And I get that it's very different for you. And that actually brought us together very powerfully. So of course, Annie's amazing at her insights and wisdom, but just to confirm what you said about the bias, we sometimes don't know, and I pursue relationship knowledge deeply, and there's still things that I don't seem to see. Yeah.
Powerful.
Cool, man. We're going to wrap up in a couple of minutes, but I want to make sure that, do you know your Instagram handle off the top of your head so you could share it?
Yeah, it's just my name, Rich Villazon, V as in Victor, ILLAZON, Rich Villazon. You can just look me up. You'll see me on Instagram. And all I have is mostly mental models. I just sort of pass on the knowledge and wisdom that I collect, and I try to incorporate. And I need to pass the flow of information and wisdom. And so I use Instagram as the medium to do that. And, excellent.
I highly recommend that you follow him and get those mental models and the maps that he's putting together, because he's got just a way of just putting them together. They're very clean, very well put, very easy to digest, small bites of highly potent information and knowledge and ways of understanding yourself, the world, and how things really work in consciousness. So definitely connect with them there. Rich, I'm going to encourage you to start producing more video and inviting people to communicate with you, because there's so much treasure inside of you for people to connect with and share. So I also encourage you to reach out to Rich and send him a direct message, and let him know you'd like to have a conversation with him, because he's a wonderful person to get in conversation with, have coaching from. He brings a lot of different perspectives. And if you're trapped in your own biases, like he was mentioning, having another human being, a coach like Rich, bringing the many different perspectives that he can bring to your experience can totally liberate you. I know that our performance is governed by how we see and how we hear and how we feel internally. And when we're trapped up inside a fixed way of thinking and seeing and hearing and feeling, we cannot perform beyond that. But if your mind can get opened through these different perspectives that you get through Rich's coaching, then all of a sudden you can take new actions and you're freed up. You're not trapped any longer and you can create new results. So highly encourage you to get connected with Rich. He's an amazing human being, as you can see through this conversation, truly embodying the masculine, true mature masculinity with his openness and vulnerability. Rich, I appreciate you, man. I really thank you for being on this video interview with me today and sharing yourself. And we get to have some more conversations, man. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, my brother. I really appreciate you, man. And yeah, I've no doubt that you're going to get to where you need to go, and you may already be there, in fact. So anyway, yeah, thanks a lot, my brother. And yeah, we'll do it again, man.
Yeah, cool. In a lot of ways, I am there because
exactly.
I love where I am, and
exactly.
I imagine and feel the future as an already done deal. It's like,
there you go.
It's like
yeah,
it's done.
Yeah, there you go, man. Awesome.
So we get to ride together. Appreciate you, brother. I'm gonna check out. We'll see you next time.